3 years ago we had a seminar out at Newlands Winery. Had a guy from Austria called Wolfgang Muir. He talked about cross-laminated timber and the buildings his company were building. It shows a whole range of amazing buildings, but I'll just show you three just to give you an example. This one's an architect's house on the hill, making use of the strength of the cross-laminated timber floors. They're about 200 mil deep, so they're very strong, and they're supported by steel poles with no bearers or joists. So it's very clean line underneath. This is one building I went to in Austria. It's a restaurant in which cantilever is 12 metres out over a river. It does have some steel in it to add strength. Steel and wood actually work well together. They use a lot in Europe. There's another building I went in. It's often talked about. It's a 9-storey building in London called Murray Grove. The timber industry there's been a lot of talk in the timber industry about this building. 29 apartments. They put them up for auction. They all sold within half an hour. Very, very popular. And just supplied panels to one in Melbourne, which is slightly taller, 10-storey. But there's an interesting comment here that German-speaking countries are world leaders in prefabrication, particularly Germany and Austria. But English-speaking countries are taking CLT to new heights with the London building and this one in Melbourne. And there's an architect in Canada, Michael Green, is talking of going to 30 stories. There will be some steel and concrete in that, but most of it will be wood. And it's all theoretically possible, and some very, very good reasons for doing so. I'll show those just to show that there's really no limitation to what could be built in Christchurch. But what I want to focus on is what are the secrets of why wood building is so popular in Austria. Just everything seems to be built of wood. And 5 or 6 years ago, I teamed up with the main solid wood buildings in New Zealand, Lockwood, Interlock, and Pramos, and we got quite a lot of government money out of the government to do some research to look at all the to look at the special features of solid wood. Now, there are a lot of similarities between solid wood and merino. So we actually used the merino New Zealand same marketing team to help us. And they said you need to highlight the special features, the attributes and benefits, they call it, of your product. And with their help and some researchers' help and what I've learned from Austria, here are the 7 of the features which often aren't well known in New Zealand but are well known in Austria. One is thermal mass. A lot of people think that wood doesn't have thermal mass. But it's actually got 2.5 times as much thermal mass as concrete on a per kilogram basis. And a very interesting study done in Austria where they had 3 buildings where they kept the outside temperature at -10 degrees. The inside temperature started at 21. And they measured how many hours it was before the inside of that wall dropped down to 0. And the well-insulated timber frame, it was only about 45 hours, but for a solid wood, it was some 6 times as long, well over 200 hours. So there's a lot more to energy performance in the building than insulation. Thermal mass has a huge effect. And we managed to get a change to the building code to reflect this. Anne McKenzie's here. Her father and Larry Bellamy at Lincoln did a lot of work for the Cement and Concrete Association about 10 years ago. And they proved that a concrete house performed better than a timber frame house. And they got to change the building code. They did the same for us with our solid wood. So the wall insulation for a timber frame in the South Island has to be an R2, but for concrete it's only 1.2 or 1.4, so that reflects the advantage of the solid wood. The next very important one is the moisture buffer. Wood has the ability to store and release moisture. There's one, when you get, the ideal humidity in a house or a building is between 30 and 55%. When you get above that, you get into mould, viruses, fungi, a lot of problems. And if you get very low humidity, you also get respiratory problems. And actually, just being in a building with either too low or too high humidity actually feels uncomfortable. High humidity, say stuffy; low humidity, it's sort of quite dry and out on the body. But they did a study where they had two identical rooms in Germany, where they had one lined with spruce boards, another one with painted plaster. They found that the painted plaster, and they injected humidity to simulate people being in those buildings. Painted plaster was in that safe range for 73% of the time, but the wood-lined one was 97%. In other words, the painted plaster was outside that range 9 times longer than the wood was. And, the problem with damp is actually those researchers have come up with a figure about 45% of New Zealand houses have damp problems and with mould. The next third one is hygienic properties. I think a lot of you probably understand the chopping board story, where bacteria don't last as long on wood boards as they do on plastic. The same applies to wall linings. And there's a company in Germany who's done some amazing research on the hygienic properties of wood, particularly pine and pine heartwood. They've actually worked out as being the best of the species. But there's some interesting stuff on the Wilms website on that. Next one is fire performance. A lot of people now understand that wood actually performs very well on fire. And there's one engineer at a conference I went to in Europe said the best way to prove it is to make a barbecue out of wood. So I made one, got it sitting outside here. If you have a fire in a wood building, the contents burn away, but once the contents stop burning, the wood walls stop burning. And another interesting thing in Germany, if you have a fire in a building, if it's made of wood, your fire brigade will go in and put it out from the inside. But if it's made of steel and concrete, they don't know when it's going to collapse, so they'll fight it from the outside. Wood chars at a predictable rate, 0.6 or 0.7 millimetres per minute. So you know by the thickness of the wall how long that building can last. The fifth one's acoustics. You're seeing a lot more buildings now with acoustic wood panels. The Christchurch domestic terminal is actually a great example. Fantastic one, and it won an award in the latest timber design categories. Also in concert halls, they often use wood for acoustics. Another one not well known here is stress. John Relic talked earlier about horse breeders. They put their horses into wood buildings rather than steel buildings because they know that the horses can tell the difference. A lot of people can actually feel the difference when they're in a wood building. A whole range of reasons. But there's one guy I met, spent a fascinating 2 hours with him actually, Max Moser in Austria, who did a study on 52 school children in 4 classrooms. 2 of those classrooms are conventional and the other 2 were lined with this special pine heartwood. They found on average that the children had 8,500 less heartbeats a day in the wood-lined rooms. And there's been a lot of other similar studies done. And they found that lowering stress can also reduce workplace accidents. They've known for centuries that wood does have this effect, but since Max Moser and his crew have designed these very specialised heart rate monitors, they've actually been proved the difference. And if you Google, coming back to this later. The other one is the carbon cycle. Aaron was talking earlier about carbon stored in our forests. You can go out with a planting spade, and in half an hour you can plant enough trees to build a house. All you got to do is wait 30 years for the sun to work, to store, to trees to grow, and only use the CO2 from the atmosphere and water from the rain. The carbon, especially with solid wood, a lot of carbon gets stored in the building, and if it's untreated wood, like the Europeans use, it can eventually be used for fuel. Now, there's one part of, a lot of the buildings I showed you earlier, KLH make, about 70% of them have plaster linings, because for a range of reasons, because partly it was just easier to cover everything with plaster. But there's one area of Austria which really concentrates on exposed wood. Like a lot of Austria, they've had a tradition of wood building. They went away to steel and concrete for about 30 years. But they've gone back to engineered type wood systems. And they've suddenly realised that they've got a real asset. And now they attract 30,000 people a year just to look at their buildings. This area of Austria has got a similar population as Canterbury, about 400,000, so it's quite a small area. And I've actually wrote a report about it. If you Google New Zealand wood and my name, you'll find a report with a whole lot of pictures about it. I want to just show you 4 buildings to highlight how they used exposed wood. I went to meet this man in the left corner, amazing guy, but he was in an office that was lined with silver fir. There was bandsawn, and this looks very similar to, this is black poplar, very light colour. Randall Gray's a great fan of black poplar. It's very tough, but on one side I've got it smooth, on the other side I've got bandsawn finish. This poplar was actually slightly damp when it was pressed in the Nextland factory a couple of weeks ago, so it has shrunk its fraction. But I'll pass it around so you can have a look. But that type of finish has some advantages. One is that it's really good at absorbing releasing moisture to get this good humidity control. It's also good for acoustics, because the smoother the wall is, the more it bounces sound back at you. This next one, that guy I was talking about, he introduced me to someone called Gerhard Ludescher, and Robin and a couple of other guys have actually met him over in Austria as well. He spent a day taking me around some amazing wood buildings, and these next 3 are some examples. This one's a supermarket which they wanted to rebuild. Of course, supermarkets don't want to be out of action for long as they lose customers. So this building was demolished and rebuilt within 3 weeks. It's a very simple design. Here again they've got steel posts, but I'd say the multi-poles would look really, really good in this place. They want a small diameter post so they can, it doesn't block the view inside the building. You'll see the big cheese board there. They're very good at promoting regional development, local industries, which is something we should do more of here. The next building is an architect's house. It's actually the brother of Ludescher, and he attracted a lot of interest to this house, and it's actually helped him win a lot of major contracts. I think his current one is something like a $2 million contract, just the architectural fees. Again, you see the strength of the wood gives you great overhangs, and it gives you a great amount of freedom, sort of freedom you can't have with a timber frame type. The next one is a regional bank, a 4-storey building with wood inside and out. Again, you'll see the bandsawn finish inside to give a living feel. Lovely foyer looking up four floors. And the bottom floor on the entrance, they actually had an area set aside, so once a month one of their clients could demonstrate their products. So they're really good at supporting local products. As Brian probably a good thing to promote from Marlborough, get the banks to highlight their customers. Now the last one is really the results of this study that Max Moser has been doing, that has really brought knotty pine back into fashion, and especially in Alpine resorts. It's what they call Zerba rooms. Zerba, I think, is Swiss stone pine. But if you Google Zerba rooms, you'll find a whole range of smart resorts that have these special rooms where stressed out business people can go and spend the weekend, relax, and go back refreshed. Now, different species. I think wood will get a lot more support if we don't just think about pine, think about what else we can do with other species. Diane Lucas will support me on this one. And also when the forest owners are replanting their forests, sometimes we replant with other species because partly to improve the landscape, but also if there may be problems with steep gullies that might be very vulnerable to erosion. So quite a few have been replanted with this black poplar. So this could be an ideal type of market for that type of timber. I've got samples outside of cross-laminated timber with 5 different species, or 4 I think it is. Pine's really good for reducing stress and lowering heart rates. Douglas fir is strong, they use a lot of that XLAM. Macrocarpa, good for durability. Eucalypt, good for flooring, I've got sampled out there. Black poplar, which I'm showing you now. And Redwood's been using black poplar for wall linings. So you can see it's very light, holds its colour well, and it's a very underrated product, and there's thousands of trees growing around hillsides, holding hillsides together. And there's another one, is Southland pine. I've got samples in the car, I'll bring it back for lunchtime. But Southland pine is also very light. It's actually not very good for structural grades because it's nowhere near as strong as stuff at our end of the island. But it could be very useful for cross-laminated timber. I've just been down to Invercargill to give a presentation on energy in buildings down there, and I think there's a great opportunity to promote steel wood cross-land. Now to summarise, engineered wood like CLT, LVL, Blueland, been used for an amazing range of buildings up to 10 stories so far, and if Michael Green gets his way they'll go up to 30 stories. But the solid wood has these magnificent seven benefits, additional benefits which affect the health in the field and the look of the building. Exposed wood adds value. You can see the wood is much more valuable than if you've got covered with plaster. And different species can add value because you use a mixture of species or a species that's appropriate for a job. And the Austrians have proven that smart design and exposed wood attracts tourists. So wouldn't it be great if we could design buildings for Christchurch which attract tourists back into Christchurch? Steel and concrete are more one-dimensional. They do a certain job and often do that job really well, but they don't have this whole range of other benefits that wood has.